So in 2019, I recorded a video called The Reality of Being an Animator. This was when I actually had a super small desk, not the best sound, not the best equipment, but I was incredibly pumped to start this YouTube channel. However, till this day, that one video is the video that had the most views of the whole channel, and I'm incredibly humbled for that. However, after having a few weeks off, I thought what it would be like to have that video now in 2024, 5 years later, since animation has changed, the games industry has changed, and the world has changed immensely since 2019. So I'm going to talk about exactly how it is to be an animator in 2024. 5 years after that video, and I'm going to talk about the good and the bad, just like in the last video, and give you 5 little pieces of information that hopefully stick with you as you want to become an animator in 2024. Let's do it. All right, welcome to another video. Welcome to my new studio office room. I'm still getting it set up. Things are a little bit ropey right now, but much more organized than it used to be. I can tell you that. So once again, welcome to the video, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Harvey Newman. I've been working in games for the past 20 plus years, and I've been sharing the knowledge of it all here in this channel as much as possible. I'm also a company director. We are working in a game called Warship Jolly Roger, and go and check it out if you haven't so far. But for this video, I want to do a little bit of a throwback, because in 2019, when I was just getting started, I released this video called, The Reality of Being an Animator, as you saw in the intro. And when I did that video, I was incredibly nervous because it was the first video that was not animation related, no tutorials, no tips, no tricks. It was just like me kind of like emptying my bag about what it was, the reality of being an animator, the good and the bad, right? And people sometimes take the bad with the connotation of like you just being negative, and I was kind of thinking maybe that was going to be the outcome of that video, but to my surprise, it was the video that actually had the most views, and it was received the best out of them all, which till this day I'm super surprised, and it just is a nod to YouTube and to social media that you should express your mind, you should express what's in your mind and be as authentic as possible and just say it as it is. So in this video, I'm going to do that as well. I brought a few notes here because things have changed so much. But in 2019, the world was in a very different place. So since then, COVID happened, there's wars around different places in the world, unfortunately. The games industry is radically different, and the animation industry is radically different. Into the Spider-Verse happened and it's changed. I never thought in 2019 that Pixar or Disney would actually be, the ones that were not as original in the realm of animation in films. Same thing with games. I never thought that maybe the AAA industry was going through such a big change as it is right now. So lots to think about in 2024 in comparison to 2019, and overall the world was in a much more peaceful and just more concise way. Think yourselves to 2019 before COVID and how things used to be so simple. And now think about today, how complex things are. So having said all that, without being too negative, in the first video, go and check it out if you haven't. Definitely a link somewhere. But I talked about a few things. I talked about the animation industry not being easy. I talked about recognition and making sure that getting your own, right? Making sure that you decide what kind of animation or animator you want to be. There's different industries to actually get into. And also I talk about ego and animation not mixing together, right? Also I talked about keep learning, keep learning, keep sharpening your skills. And lastly, I talked about, your personal work, to make sure that you're always kind of trying to make sure that your work reflects your ability as an animator. Now for this video, I want to actually kind of start things slightly different. And I want to talk about what the AAA industry used to be in 2019 and what it is now, and also what the indie industry used to be in 2019 and what it is now. So when I actually made that video, I was working at DICE in Sweden. AAA studio, was really big. Star Wars Battlefront was massive. So at that point in time, if you wanted to be a gameplay animator, working as an animator in games, working in AAA games was the highest achievement you could actually get, and it was something super coveted by all animators that wanted to work in games. Nowadays is very different. So nowadays I feel like things are shifting, and just like back then, where I actually in 2019 I started kind of feeling the beginnings of animators wanting to work for games specifically, which before, maybe 10 years before then, 2009 or so, most animators wanted to just work for films, and games was just a nice to have kind of on the side. Nowadays, I feel like people are shifting. Most animators, now they want to work in games, don't want to work on AAA games. They want to work in indie or AA games. And that's a really interesting shift for me, because I always felt like the most original ideas, the most fun that you can have is normally in smaller teams and indie development, because that actually allows you to foster your own ideas and making sure that you have a voice, making sure that you are heard, making sure that you're having fun. Even if you have frustrations, you can vent them, which is not the case in AAA gaming. So I'm loving that change. That is actually a positive change in my view. I do think that, the AAA industry has been here for so long, and it's been like getting bigger and bigger and bigger to a point where it's no longer sustainable, at least from my perspective. So I do think that reverting back to the good old days where it didn't take a huge team to make a really quality game is actually the way to go forward. And this is something that I actually saw, and I do think that is what's going to stay here, at least for the next few years. So first tip, decide which industry you want to be in, AAA or indie, right? Or AA, I should say. Small team or versus big team. Most likely, if you've done your research, you probably know more or less where you're going to end up in. And if you follow the trend of the industry, most likely you're going to get to your own conclusions. But follow the game awards, follow the games of the years, see what fits your needs, and also see what kind of style of game would you like to work on. Because when it comes to the indie industry, there's so many different styles and things being tried all the time that I'm pretty sure all animators out there that want to get into gameplay animation will be able to find something that fits their needs, and then make sure that your shore reel is like solid for that specific look or style as you go through. Also, something to mention here is that indie studios, AA studios are way less fussy at getting talent in, while the AAA industry, at least back then, was incredibly fussy, and you had to have some big name or big game in your CV in order to be hired or to at least be considered, which is not the case anymore. So I do think it's much easier now to get a job as an animator than it used to be at 2019 now. So I do think that's really, really positive for all animators out there. So another thing that I've mentioned in the previous video was recognition, and it was recognition within the company that you actually were hired. So being the man within that company, so you are recognized for your skills, and then you can actually rank up and do better within that company. I think things have changed here quite a bit, and meaning that now the recognition is much more on the individual than the company itself, meaning that if you actually want to make a name for yourself, you kind of have to do it outside on social media, by sharing your work, by sharing your passion, by sharing how talented you are, so other people can see it and they can recognize you from somewhere. I do think that unlike in 2019, where you could be somebody that is not big online, it's not even online, and you still have a career that is really big and you had made many, many amazing games, it's becoming less likely nowadays as we expand this individualism and making sure that you actually kind of like share your individual knowledge, which is another positive for me, because I think that you expressing yourself and making sure that you focus on what you want to do personally is always the way to go. Because there was such a thing back then as in like making your shore reel to cater for a specific studio or specific company, and that's still somewhat true. But nowadays is very much about like, this person has made such a ruckus with their shore reel and their personality and their creativity, and look at how many things they have done that are so cool. We want this person to join our studio. And sometimes you don't even have to apply. They just hire you because they saw you somewhere, and then they get in touch, and then all of a sudden you get a job. So recognition personally is much bigger now than recognition within the studio. Now, on the last video as well, I mentioned about ego in animation, not mixing. And this is still true nowadays. The animation industry is super small, everybody knows each other. And most animators that I know that are really amazing, they're incredibly humble. They are willing to share their knowledge, they are willing to share everything they've learned, and they are humble. First and foremost. And I've made a video a while back about what it takes to make a great animator, to be a great animator. Go and check it out if you haven't so far. But that is definitely true still today, right? So those things haven't changed. However, I do think that good personality in animation do mix incredibly well, right? So instead of ego, just good personality. And this goes back to the last point that I just made about making a name for yourself. The more you actually grow in social media, the more you share your passion, the more you share your knowledge, the more you share your work, the more people will start understanding what kind of person you are personally, individually. Do you connect with people? Do you actually feel like somebody that they could hang out with? So try to actually showcase yourself within social media. So I didn't know it back then when I was doing my YouTube channel, but in a way, me making this YouTube channel and talking to you guys every single week and all that stuff allows you guys to know pretty much what I am or who I am as a person, Harvey Newman, right? And as a result, you know, if you watch my videos and you subscribe if you haven't so far, but hopefully you like it enough that you actually not only want to continue watching the videos, but if one day we get to work together, it's going to be super exciting for both of us and it's going to be great. And that's only because of YouTube, right? So I do think that there's a lot of power for you to showcase your personality ahead of time. And then when you get that interview, when you actually kind of like get that job, then it's going to be easy peasy, because most of the interviews that I get nowadays from clients and different people is mostly because they've seen me online and they know me already. That's kind of the feeling they have. Oh, I know you. I already know. I know personality is kind of like, you know, out of the equation now because we feel like we know you. We just want to know if you can deliver on the work that we require of you. So it's almost like you're taking a bolt out of the equation when it comes to like the interviews. It's almost like they already know the personality, they already know the work. So there's two things. Now they just want to know about the specifics. And that's really cool. So make sure that, you know, you actually get that good personality mixing with good animation and put it out there for the world to see so you get the most bang for buck. And one thing that I didn't mention on the last video, and I do think is important nowadays, and you can start to hear or see a little, you know, theme here, is making sure that your work is individual and is yours and you stand out from the rest because it's you and nobody else can be you. And what I mean by that is that you have a unique voice, and no matter how you decide to share your work and to share your voice, it doesn't matter if it's TikTok or Instagram or whatever it is, make sure that you do it in your own way. Make sure that you don't actually copy anybody or somebody had a good idea and you're like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I do the same thing? Those things don't work, and especially on a creative industry like animation, normally they actually backfire big time because you then are perceived as somebody that just copied the idea from this other animator that probably started it all, right? So make sure that you are an individual and your work is individual, and then those two things together means that you are that person that did this thing and then you're recognized for the thing. This is really important and it's hard to grasp because it's just an idea, it's just a thing. But if you hit you right and you have the idea and you're like, wow, I haven't seen this before online, nobody's doing this thing, what if I did that? Right? 9 times out of 10 that works out, especially if you persist and if you're consistent through your work. And this is another thing that I want to add here. Consistency, especially online, especially when you're showcasing your work, is incredibly important because that's going to be another metric that most people are going to measure you by, right? Like my channel, the YouTube channel, is not the biggest channel, right? 50K, even though we need to celebrate that 50K here in the channel soon. But and I'm thankful for all of you, but it's not like, you know, 1 million or 500,000 or anything like that. It's not the biggest channel, but the one thing that I keep hearing people saying all the time is the consistency part of it all. Like, you keep things so consistent. How can you upload so consistently? I keep seeing your videos all the time, and that is a trait that people can immediately relate to your personality and your animation, right? If he's consistent with his videos, if he's consistent with his animation and his skills and showcasing his work, then most likely he's going to be consistent if you hire him for this thing, right? So it's very important for you to keep that consistency and the hard work and making sure that people see that part of you as well as everything else. Now, this last 2 points is for all those that I experienced. And just like the last video, I'm going to talk yet again about you continuing to work on your own skills, on your own animation, as you actually kind of like become more and more experienced. On the last video, I mentioned about the fact that if you're stagnant and you think that because you made it and you're now in a big studio and you're earning a lot of money, you most likely, at the cadence that the internet goes and how things are changing and AI and all these other things, you most likely lose that battle and eventually be out of work. And that is a very bad place to be, and I'm very afraid of that, and you should be as well. So the only way for you to be ahead of the game, the only way for you to kind of like be like, you know, innovative and hungry and also thinking outside the box is by you constantly sharpening your skills by yourself, not at work, because normally work and contracts and things like that, they normally give you things that even though they're cool, but they're probably not the thing that you want to do. So you have to sharpen your skills all the time and not fall behind. And the cadence of things in comparison from 2019 to now, they're incredibly faster now than they used to be now. So you kind of have to keep up the momentum. And this is something that obviously as you get old, I'm getting old, is very difficult. But if you get to my age, and you actually kind of like are in a position of authority, and I'm not saying that as in like you want to be a cop or you want to be a know-it-all, like I mean that you made a name for yourself, therefore you're in a good position. It means that you actually stable enough that you can just continue doing what you're doing, but you know, trying to upgrade all the time, but at a slightly slower pace. But the important bit is, especially in the beginning of a career, you need to work incredibly hard so you can then like, you know, relax towards the end of your career. And this is where I'm at the moment. I feel like I'm in halfway through there and I'm still working hard. But the idea is that the more I prove myself to the world, to you guys, to the companies, to, you know, all these projects and stuff, the less research, the less outreach, the less things I need to do in order for people to kind of come to me with, you know, requests and things like that. So make sure you work incredibly hard in the beginning, so later on in your career, you can just relax a little bit more. And last but not least, for sure, because this is the biggest one of them all, especially if you're experienced. If you're experienced, make sure you share your knowledge out there. There's so, like, the internet is so vast and there's so many things to actually learn from. And AI is kind of like gobbling it all up and all these other things. However, the individual knowledge of each one of us as we actually learn different things, and it can be from animation to life lessons and stuff like that, is very, very unique. It's a unique perspective, and it might click with certain people. Like the things that I'm telling you here might click with some, but not with others. And this is when the more voices we have sharing their experience with experience themselves, the more we have, like, you know, things will make sense. Because if you're anything like me and you're looking for like reviews or clarification in a specific idea, you don't go to one source only, you go to multiple sources. And when those multiple sources start saying the same thing, that's when you realize that this must be true. So you're probably not just listening to me kind of like saying these things, you're looking to other channels or other people to kind of like hopefully give you more information about this kind of stuff, and therefore you go, oh, if they're all saying the same thing, then great, right? So this is why I think that if your experience is really important for you to share your voice and share your perspective on the games industry, on animation, on film, it doesn't matter what it is. I do think it's really important for you to share your opinion, because I do think that this visual medium that we have, doesn't matter if it's TikTok or YouTube, becomes like a huge source of information, like transfer. And what used to be tutorials back in the day, where you spend like 2 hours watching a tutorial and trying to learn it all and trying to copy everything, is kind of changing into like little tidbits of information that I really condensed like a TikTok, so you learn everything in a minute, right? People have short attention spans. So you sharing your knowledge means that you are kind of like contributing to this vast knowledge that we have when it comes to animation, especially games. And I still think that 5 years later, there's still not enough animation channels specific for games here on YouTube. So if you want to join me. I always celebrate YouTubers that actually want to do this, because I do think that the more of us, the better the games industry becomes, and the more knowledgeable people are that want to get into the games industry become as well. So that's all I had for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and as always, stay well, stay safe. Peace.